tonight we're really, really honored to have two of those leaders here with us today. Dr. Corliss Outley of Texas A&M University and Dr. Harrison Pinckney IV of Clemson University.
This is probably the easiest of the three videos to watch, at least it is for me personally. So 2 years ago, 3 years ago now, 4 years ago, shared a email on our professional listserv and really challenged our colleagues, a lot of researchers in the area of recreation and leisure, a lot of professionals in the area of recreation and leisure, as to why are we not having these discussions? What is going on that incidents like this and worse are happening regularly? And it's not hearsay, right? You know, we have a video right here that is clearly showing this police officer who's really is running around, you know, just sort of like a madman, not just throwing this one girl to the ground, but pulling a gun on kids. He challenges these two kids that, you know, what you're doing is illegal. It's not illegal. You know, you said sit down, they didn't. That's not illegal. I've never seen a law that says you have to sit down when a police officer tells you to, right? But these are happening in play spaces, and we are an entire field of people centered on play, and we're not having these discussions. And so Stephanie Garst, who's here from Clemson University, emailed me after I, got on the listserv. And when you're a young faculty member and you have former professors and all of these other big names in the field and you're on this listserv, you're really timid about hitting that send button. And so I didn't know what was going to happen. But Stephanie emailed me along with someone who actually encouraged us to write the paper that you all wrote. And Stephanie said, come to our Lake conference and talk about this. And so, so we've been sort of engaged in this discussion. And so today what we want to do is we want to build on the paper, right? So, you all have read the paper. If you read it, how many of us read it online and saw the videos? Okay. So if you've printed it off, go back and look at it and hit the view or click here or something, I think it says in there, and you'll see the other videos for each of the case studies. And so what we're going to be discussing this evening is, okay, you read the paper, now what? All right, it's when we showed these videos at Clemson, by the time the lights came back on and we watched the last video, everyone, including the panel, we were all in tears or on the verge of tears. It was really difficult, and emotion is good when we can connect to people's hearts, but we have to move past that, right? We have to get beyond just, I really feel so bad for what's going on over in that community. All right, are we still going to go get a burger now? It really has to be some action that follows up. And so what we're hoping to do is to discuss what does that action look like? What can we do when this room of people go back to our respective communities? What can we do to challenge this, to challenge the oppression that's taking place in these communities that's stifling play for so many youth? And even though we talk about playing while black in the paper, it's not just limited to black youth, right? It's Native American youth. We're having a major issue in our country right now talking about undocumented immigrants. Those are still kids, right? And they still have a right to play, regardless of what our political views are or whether they should be here or not. Play is still a right that they should have access to. And lastly, of course, I mention this often, is our youth who are Muslim, right? And we're doing racial profiling even of Muslim communities, and what does that mean for those communities? So that's what Corliss and I are going to delve into today.
So he gave you, can you guys hear me? I think so. Hey, thank you, Adam. So he gave you an overview, and one of the things that we talk about in the paper is really looking at the loss of innocence. The McKinney pool party incident that you just saw. One of the things that struck with us, and me being a mom of girls, but also being a female as well, is that you had a police officer really tackle a girl to the ground in a bikini. And I want you to think about that when he took her head and said, put your head in the ground. And then he took both knees and he sat on top of her. And the fact that he took out a gun and just waved it around. And it's interesting in the video, and I'm sorry I'm going off script now, But it's interesting in the video because when he pulled out that gun, did you guys notice 2 other cops showed up immediately? But once he holstered it, they didn't have any issues with him. They just let him just keep going wild and started looking at other issues. And so even in that circumstance, when people used the defense of, well, he was scared, there was too many people around him, the majority of the kids, even though they were talking back, because if you know adolescent development, they're supposed to talk back at this stage. They're challenging authority to figure out their own identity. So even as they were talking back, not one youth actually stepped up to him. They talking back like, I don't care what you say. I'm going to do what I want to. F you. They just kept on going. But they did it and was walking away. But he still felt the need to exert his authority. And so we're going to talk about some of that and where that comes from. And then in Grand Rapids, if you saw that particular video, it was about loss of freedom. It was 5 kids who were walking back from playing basketball at the local community rec center, got pulled up on by a police officer. He pointed the gun at them and kept it there. Then once they figured out those kids weren't even the kids they were looking for, they put them in the back of a police car and called their parents to come get them. They didn't release them. So those kids at that point, after this incident, now don't want to go to their local rec center anymore. Their parents in the video talked about, that's why I don't let you go anywhere. That's why I keep you in the house. But the kid did nothing wrong. So it's a loss of freedom that they're scared to even go into their neighborhood now just to go outside and play. And then the last video goes through Tamir Rice, 14-year-old playing in a park. You guys know how we do. Back in the day, it used to be, Indians and cowboys was back in the day. Now you can get a BB gun and you're playing around like you're shooting each other. Hey, wow, hey, what? And that's all they was doing. Someone called 911 and said, hey, I think it's a juvenile, but they keep pulling out a gun in and out, but I think it's just a play gun, right? Cop pulls up. 2 cops in the car. The cop on the passenger side jumps out. Tamir is sitting at a local park bench, table. He stands up. The cop gets out and shoots him. Never said a word. Never identified. And all of that was done, if you look at the video, in less than 7 seconds. So it literally means we have Black children right now, when they go out to play, it could end up in their death. So why is this happening? First, let's talk about play. And you stole all of my beginning. I'm not going to talk about it. Both of you. But the United Nations has what's called the Convention on the Rights of the Child. And if you have never seen this document, and you're in our playfield, health, education, you need to read this. This Convention on the Rights of the Child goes through everything that says children have rights. They have a right to an education. They have a right to be free from terrorism. They have a right to be free from violence. It's what everybody in this room wants. It's all of our ideals put into one. And so in this Convention of the Rights of the Child, it actually has Article 31 that talks, and I'm going to read it just because I love it. But it states, parties recognize the right of the child to rest and leisure, to engage in play and recreational activities appropriate to the age of the child, and to participate freely in cultural life and the arts. And you can't tell me when you heard that, you're like, dang, I like that, right? We like this. So this was adopted in 1989. The US signed it, the original adaptation in 1995, but they still have not ratified it. There are only 2 countries, who haven't ratified. Anybody want to guess which 2? The United States and China. The only 2. But we as the US say that children are important. but we still have yet to ratify this because parts of the area of the rights of the child says they have a right to their own development. They have a right to be free from violence. And we have political groups that feel when we say right to violence, you're taking away my right as a parent to spank. That's one of the reasons they won't ratify. So if you guys want to protest, that's something to protest. I just want you to know that. But when we talk about this right, we all in this room know that play is a human right. It is what we need to develop into adulthood. It provides us all these benefits. I'm not going to go through them, but it's everything from self-esteem, self-respect, opportunity to learn how to socialize, things about learning and exploration. We already know all of this stuff is important, or you guys wouldn't even be at this conference, because we know play becomes important to all of us, for every single child in the world. But unfortunately, that is not the case when it comes to race. We are now finding patterns, and research is showing that Black childhood, particularly in the US, has never been something of importance. Some of that is due to fear based on stereotypes that other groups may have against children. So parents don't allow their kids to play in certain areas. For us in our field and Parks and Rec and outdoor education, as well as environmental education, we know that communities of color don't allow their children necessarily to go into the outdoors. If you visited national parks, it is underrepresented by the number of people of color, especially those who are native to the US. And so we know that. But a lot of it has led to this loss of childhood for most Black Americans, particularly because of these inequitable systems. And it's led to this presumption that when we see Black children, they're not as innocent as white children. When we see Black children, even during play, they must be up to something. It's too many of them together. What's going on? And so all of that has led to what we call the white racial frame. And that was developed by Joe Fagan, who I love, and he's a scholar at Texas A&M, where he talks about the white racial frame. What that is saying is that there is this master narrative in the US. And this master narrative is historical. It's historical because all of our systems have been built for the white male, or individuals that come from white background. And it is actually immersed in our policies, our laws, how we dress, our music, everything about society. And not only is it immersed in that white individuals actually act on that because it provides them those privileges. It provides them access. It provides them to actually achieve what is called the American dream. And so when we think about that, it's led to things like the white gaze. If anybody doesn't know this picture, this is Barbecue Becky. Everybody who doesn't know about Barbecue Becky, raise your hand. Barbecue Becky, she went viral 2 years ago. Last year, 2018. Ooh, I'm already in 2020, sorry. She went viral last summer, where young men were trying to have a barbecue in a park in Oakland, and she felt they were in the wrong place with a charcoal grill and didn't have a permit. So what did she do? Barbecue Becky picked up the phone, called 911, and called the police on them. She stayed on the phone with the police for over 2 hours, waiting for police to come and actually remove them because they did not belong. And so it's that white gaze that allows us to not only see young Black children as not being innocent, but the fact that not only police can surveillance them, but now white individuals can surveillance them. In the summer, and Harrison will talk about this, in the summer of 2018, there are over 50 plus incidences that went viral. Everything from Barbecue Becky to Permit Patty. And get these names because once it goes viral, somebody comes up with a name. and it goes on Twitter and Facebook that that's the name. Permit Patty to Pool
Patrol
Paula. So they get these names because what's been happening is that with this white racial frames, whites, particularly adults, have what we call this unconscious bias. That if my white kids are in this pool and all of a sudden these black kids show up, y'all get out the pool. They don't belong. Why are you here? What is going on? You don't belong here. Do you have a membership? And so it's this idea that you can't be in certain places or certain settings. And so not only do the adults have this gaze, we also have what calls law enforcement is giving the permission to reinforce that gaze. Does everybody understand how that works? So it's okay for a white person to call on a youth who may be selling water in a Washington Mall. I know. I gotta slow down. He told me I'm telling him his part.
Yeah, we choose guys again. Thank you. So,
you see how I'm gonna go like this? I didn't tell all of it yet. Wait,
you don't need to slide for the ending.
So what does this all mean? If all of this white gaze is going on and this white racial frame is over all of us, even for us that may be of color, how do we put a stop to it? What are our next steps? And now I'm going to turn it over to Harrison.
So this is the problem. This is me and Corliss all day, every day. Like this is not an act. But when we get out and we do presentations all the time, and people think this is like some comedy routine, and it's really not. And we sit around her house and do this. We sit around my house and do this. And her husband and my wife just look at us and be like, they got issues.
We can finish each other's sentences. It's kind of cute.
Yeah. So, as a sneak peek, we are working on a new paper, and so we're going to talk about that very briefly. We have Dr. Nia Nunn here from Ithaca College. Nia, raise your hand. And her students gave our paper its title yesterday because, again, Corliss and I couldn't agree on what the paper should be called, and so we put it to a vote, and her students helped us. But what we've done is we looked specifically at the year of 2018, and this image is the high school wrestler. Some of us heard this story, and the referee stopped the match and required him to cut his dreads in order to complete the match. And so we're seeing these type of problems arise. So what we've done is we, as Corliss hinted at, we've actually cataloged, just for the summer of 2018 only, we cataloged all of the incidents in which people of color were engaged in play spaces, and the police were called on them, and as a result of another citizen feeling like this person did not have a right to exist. And so if you were to go online and type in, I think it's something like Living While Black, you'll see all of these different stories. What I've done here is just showed you specific incidents that involve kids. Now, one of the things it could be, because it was, we have over 50 stories, but we had to qualify this, right? So we didn't look at the entire year of 2018. We only looked at the summer, so we're talking about 3 months. And we're also only looking at incidents in which there's video evidence, right? So we're not even talking about the countless number of other stories that were reported, but we don't have videos. And so what we looked at were either people going live on social media and showing the incident from a first person, or in the case of Barbecue Becky, you had an ally who stood by and she was the one that pulled out her phone, or in some cases you may even have body camera footage from the police officer. So these are just the ones that involve kids, all right? And trying to think, this one up here, the second one, the baseball game Corliss alluded to, there was an 8-year-old that was selling bottled water outside of the San Francisco Giants stadium. And if any of you are from a city, you know that happens outside of stadiums. You know, people are always and nobody has a permit. No one has a permit in a lot of those cases. And what was really interesting about that woman was that she was from California. Well, obviously it's in San Francisco, but she was selling weed before it became legal, right? And people were like, we've been supporting your business, and now here you are, and you weren't within your rights, and now here you are attacking an 8-year-old. I like this last one especially. This was a local pool where there was a summer Arabic enrichment camp, and so there were Muslim youth that were asked to get out of the pool, and the claim was that it was their attire was not appropriate, but it was appropriate for their religious beliefs, and so this is what we've been looking at. The second thing I like the Colorado State University. These were actually high school Native Americans students that were on a campus tour, and because they weren't asking questions, a mom called the police on them. They must not belong here because they're so quiet. All right. So these are ones in which families were involved. Okay, and so this last one, this was a black youth pastor that was driving 2 white children of his friends. He was babysitting them. And not only did the woman approach him at Walmart to ask to speak to the kids because she wanted to make sure they were safe, she followed him to his home and sat in front of his house until the police showed up. And so these are families, but we're still highlighting them because there are kids that are involved. This one here, the subway, there was a family that was traveling to North Carolina, and it was about 7 of them, and they sat down, they ordered their food, they ate, and then they started using the restrooms before they got back in their car to continue the road trip. Anyone here with kids or has had kids and done a road trip with kids, that is what you do. Well, the subway employee called because they're up to something suspicious. They're all going to the bathroom. They've ordered food, they've eaten the food. Okay. All right, so anyways, this is what we're working on. And so this is what is, I did not make this up, okay? This is, Twitter is out of control, okay? And there is a faculty member at the University of Michigan, or he might be at Illinois, I think he's at Michigan, Andre Brock, and he's the one that coined the term Black Twitter, all right? And Black Twitter is pretty much black people get on Twitter and just they're ridiculous, and it's a lot of fun. Yes, and there's a lot of things. So this is something that's going on right now. How do you know if you should call the cops? And really, it comes down to if it's arson, rape, or murder. Yes, please call the cops. Anything else, please mind your business and move on. And this was a direct response to what's been going on largely during 2018. All right, so. Now you have a sneak preview. You know what the next paper is going to look like. Let's talk about just steps. And this is where we want to really address what do we do in this room? What do we do when we leave this room? And so we're going to look at it at the individual level, the organization level, and then the community level. All right, so with the individual, great quote that Corliss found, the problem isn't diversity. The problem emerges because we live in a world that encourages people to use their differences to include or exclude, reward or punish, credit or discredit, elevate or oppress, value or devalue, leave alone or harass. And this is what we see in the initial video that was shown. This is what we see in all of these cases that were listed in that table. So first thing that I think that we have to start with as individuals is this concept of implicit bias. And we're still learning about implicit bias, I think, at the community level, and understanding that we're bombarded with tons of information at every single moment. And so what we do is our mind starts to take shortcuts in order to help us, not have to process individually every single piece of information that we receive. And so we start to make shortcuts through connections. So we'll make these connections, and that's where the implicit bias comes in. So typically when someone says peanut butter, you automatically think what? Jelly, right? And so that's one of the, no, Corliss, not bananas. So implicit bias is this idea that it really makes our world a lot simpler for us. Implicit bias is useful because it helps us to be able to, function on a daily basis, but it can also become very dangerous if we're not aware of those biases. And so we have this idea of implicit attitudes, and this is where not only do we make these associations between A and B, but these associations actually dictate our behavior, right? And so we receive, we're socialized into these attitudes and these associations from media, from play, from messages that we receive from our parents, from messages that we receive in school. So we have implicit biases, not just about race, but about gender, about religion, about politics. I teach a diversity course at Clemson, and so I have actually completely thrown out the words liberal and conservative in my classroom, because once I say liberal, everyone thinks tree hugger, and once I say conservative, everyone thinks closed-minded, right? And these are examples of implicit attitudes. And so if I identify as a liberal and I hear that you're a conservative, I automatically think, I can't talk to you now, right? Or if I'm a conservative and you're a liberal, then I'm like, Jesse, you're going to hell, right? Am I lying? No. I'm just saying, that's just okay. So we have these implicit biases. One of the things that I'll encourage you all to do is, if you are not aware, there's an implicit attitudes test that's available online. Now, it gets a whole lot of criticism, for some of its shortcomings, but it is a tool that exists to at least get you start to thinking about what might be some attitudes and some beliefs that I am unaware of, right? And I know that I've even taken it and I've done tests on, understanding race, and then there are some negative implicit biases that I possess, right? Now, the question is, do I possess them because I'm engaged in this literature and this research, or is it because there are certain messages that even I received as a kid that Black people do this and Black people don't do that? But it is a good guide to get you started. So, 4 steps. So type in IAT, implicit attitude test online, and you should be able to find it at Harvard University. Okay, so 4 steps in addressing these implicit biases. First is to evaluate your own actions, and this is where I do think the test can come into play, but really starting to become aware of what might be some shortcuts that I'm taking in engaging with other people that think differently from me, people that look differently from me, people that believe differently from myself, right? Start there. Start an open discussion. Facilitate an open discussion. I think one of the things that we struggle with here specifically in the United States a lot of times is having civil disagreements, right? It's hard for us to, one of the best videos I've seen is this kid, they're having Thanksgiving dinner. He just gets so mad that he flips the whole Thanksgiving dinner table. I mean, he ruins the turkey, everything. It is entertaining, but it really does speak to some of the challenges that we face in our country. We struggle, right? And even when we watch the news, you have people from 2 different political parties or 2 people from, different sides of some type of social issue. And for the most part, it's a lot of yelling. It's very rarely do we see true open dialogue, true open discussion. And so if you're unable to have those open discussions on your own, find someone that can help facilitate that for you, all right? Solicit justifications of other people's views and actions. So having conversations with others around you, asking them how did they reach those conclusions. And so in some cases, it's understanding people that see the world differently from you, and maybe by understanding their justification, it helps to open your eyes. Or if you see that you have someone in your own circle that truthfully that, hey, I'm sorry, that's just negative thinking, that is not accurate, force them to back it up. Hold one another accountable. And that's what we often, myself and Corliss, us coming here and saying, we should be more cognizant of how we treat people from different racial groups. We have something to gain or lose by that, right? But the moment that Jesse stands up, I'm sorry, you're right in front of me, you have your name tag showing. But the moment that Jesse starts to stand up and starts to challenge other people from his group, that, hey, we have to start thinking about this differently, and forcing people to justify their actions, justify their beliefs, and challenging them when they're coming up short, it takes on a very different meaning, right? And it carries a whole lot more weight. So think about that. And then lastly, expand your direct circle of influence. And this is Don't go out and find a black friend. All right, let's start there. All right, don't do that. Don't do that. Okay. Don't find a gay friend. Don't find a Native American friend. Don't do that. But really challenge yourself to spend time with people that just don't see the world the same way that you do. Right? See what other ideas are out there that you might be able to grow from. And that goes for everybody. And Corliss and I have been having that conversation all day yesterday, even when we were hanging out this morning, we were talking about that it is so important that both sides do this, right? And it's not all on one side to come over here into 2019. It's also on those of us that see ourselves as progressive to take the time to go and have those conversations and expose ourselves to other people's perspectives and hear them out. All right, sorry. So second part of this, in addition to implicit bias and understanding our own personal biases, is to develop cultural competency, okay? And so this is where we really take the time to, for just to shorten it, empathize. Really try to take the time to understand individuals from perspectives that are different from ours, right? And so I talk about the platinum rule. How many of us are familiar with the platinum rule? Have ever heard that term? Okay. What is the platinum rule?
It's a counter of the golden rule, which
Right.
says, treat others the way you want to be treated. And the platinum rule, I believe, is don't treat others the way you want to be treated, but treat them the way they want to be treated.
Right. So treat others the way they want to be treated. And I think that that's what really sums up cultural competency, right? And this is a challenge because, again, I'm in South Carolina, so if we talk about LGBTQ issues, for example, with my students, and it's like, well, I want them to tell me I'm going to hell. And I'm telling you, this is what my students tell me because I'm deep in the South. Deep. With a buckle of the Bible Belt. With a buckle, right? And so I said, no, that's what you say as a person of your faith. But if you were in these shoes where you understand that by coming and telling my parents that I believe I'm gay, you're risking getting kicked out of the house, you'll want somebody to be a little bit more empathetic to you. And that's what cultural competence really gets at. Trying to develop a sense of understanding and know you won't be able to live someone else's life, but try to understand what that life might be like and how can I respond more appropriately, not from a seat of I'm the savior coming to help you and I'm so sorry that you're in this, this dark deficit of life. Me and Corliss, we enjoy being black. We really do enjoy it. And Nia enjoys being black. And I'm guessing because you waved at me, you enjoy being black. Right? Don't feel bad for us. We're okay. We've been black for a long time now. Right? It's not like it didn't happen last week. Like, wait, what? I'm black. Oh God, what am I gonna do with this, right? So don't approach it from it's not a sympathy thing, right? That's what I'm getting at. It's not feeling bad for these youth, but it's an empathy thing. If this were me, how would I want someone to respond to me? Because I know we're
This is what happens when we're together.
Yes.
I am gonna go back.
Okay.
Sorry. One of the things to know about cultural competency is that you can do as many trainings as you want to, you will never be competent. I need you to understand that. Cultural competency is a journey, but you will never reach the end. So we talk now about cultural humility, is understanding with that empathy and sensitivity. Okay? So I have to emphasize that because I have a lot of people who will leave and go, well, I'm just going to go to a training and I can get it. That's not how it works. Okay? And just because you have a sister or somebody likes your greens because you cook them really good, and they're like, oh, girl, you cook like black folks. That doesn't mean you're culturally competent. You put some cornrows in your hair doesn't mean you're culturally competent. So that's one of the things I try to make sure people understand that. And we're laughing. We try to do presentations where it's lighthearted because it can become a sensitive issue, but I want to make sure people understand that. So at the organizational level, because all of you are here representing mostly organizations, what can we do? How do we look at this issue of playing while Black, and actually figure out solutions within our communities. Some of the challenges are that organizations use terminology or they put together activities that are programmatic, that don't truly address the issue, the core issue at hand. So we'll talk about things like color blindness. I don't see color. I tell myself, you don't see me? If you didn't see a picture of us and we just walked in, and I said, hi, I'm Corliss, most people would be like, oh, she's Black. And that's where that unconscious bias comes in. That's where that implicit bias comes in.
I'm Harrison Parker Pinckney the fourth. Nobody expects a Black dude walking in. That's it, I'm done.
But it would be interesting if I told you I did my DNA test through Ancestry.com, and it came back that I am over 24% Irish. Look, everybody's going, ooh, think about that. So if I start walking around with a kilt, what you gonna say to me? Because my DNA says one thing, but the skin color shows something else. And people treat me based on skin color. The other thing is assimilation. We talk about the fact that in the US, we want people to assimilate. We want them to assimilate into American culture and into organizations. But assimilation actually is telling you to erase all of your identity. Erase everything about your background and your heritage. And so we really aren't what we thought we were, that whole idea of a melting pot. We really are a tossed salad. I like Caesar salad. I like Cobb salad. It's kind of good when you have all that stuff mixed together, and that's who we are when we look at that. Diversity. Yeah, we try to say diversity. You guys know how every organization has their diversity statement. But guess what? It's an issue, because it suggests that if we simply add more diversity, yeah, let's put some people on some of our brochures. Yeah, let's add 1 or 2 more staff. Oh yes, we're gonna give back and do a backpack drive for the local schools, that we are now diverse. And that's not how it works. If the organization, leadership, and staff haven't built skills to actually break down those systemic barriers, there is no diversity. You're just window dressing. That's all you're doing. And that does not help those that you are trying to help, and we'll talk about that. And then finally, cultural competency and cultural humility. 2 decades, we've been doing this work in this area, and things still haven't changed. So it must mean we're not doing something right. So if we think about those challenges, I'm sure you guys are going, well, what can we do? You need to be a culturally responsive organization. Address issues of power. Ultimately, it's the issues of power that have put a lot of individuals in the settings and the places that they are. But you also need to have a committed path to improving the lives, not only within the organization, but also outside the organization. And be responsive to the interests of those that you're supposed to serve. So what does that mean? This is a great quote that I love to really get at the home of it. We always say we want to make a difference, even for those of us that are in this field. But it's universal. It's what everyone needs. We know it makes a difference in kids' lives. But if the principle is first do no harm, then we should consult the people that we're actually trying to work with. Because how do you know that you're not doing more damage? And 9 times out of 10, we are. Because we're not addressing the needs of the community. So here are some best practices. It needs organizational commitment, leadership, and governance. You need to have racial equity policies in place. You need to look at things like resource allocation. You can't say, yes, diversity is important, and we have this new diversity committee, and then there's no allocation for the budget. They have no power. All they get to do is put something up for Black History Month, maybe something Kwanzaa, Cinco de Mayo, some signs. But is that truly trying to change at an organizational level? So that's when we're talking about issues in terms of resource allocation. And you need data. If you say you want to make a change, prove it. data out there, do some evaluations. If you want to increase the number of people that come into the Phoenix Zoo, just as we just met and we got to do a selfie, and you say you want to increase the number of Native Americans and the number of Hispanics and African Americans, guess what? If you got 0 and 2 years later you still have 0, you didn't do nothing. You need to have those numbers to even prove that you're committed. And then you need to be able to work within the community. That's the last area. And this is the area that's most comfortable for me, but also the area that I work in. And one of the ways that I talk about community is there's a history about Black youth and play. There's a history that Black youth and babies were used to bait alligators out of the swamp. There's a history that Black lynchings occurred while people were picnicking. And everybody got together on a Sunday to watch the lynchings that were happening in that Sunday afternoon. There's a history there. And at the same time there's this history, we come to contemporary times and we just showed you things about policing, and you guys are wondering why they won't come into your center. And you're wondering why they won't come to those community meetings that you actually set for 5:30 and they're already working double shifts. But then you say, no kids can come because they need babysitting or they need food, and so you're not serving dinner because it's not in the budget. And you're wondering why there's not inclusion. It's because of that history. And the only way to get through that history is what we talk about radical healing. You're going to have to do something radical. You're going to have to let everything go from the past and do some things called restorative practices, which means the communities have to come together to heal. It may not take a day. It may not take a month. It may take you a year before you actually gain the trust of some of these communities. But restorative practices is a way of thinking. It's a way of strengthening communities where you have healing circles. You have community discussions. You actually listen. And don't say as soon as someone says, oh, well, this policeman did X, Y, Z. Don't get me wrong, when we showed the McKinney video, if you look in YouTube or Twitter, there are a lot of people defending the cops. Lots of people. But think about how a young girl felt. Think about if it was your child and that's what you heard happened to her in a bikini and someone sat on her back. And so you have to think about how can we restore. And so restorative practices is actual framework. If you want to improve individuals' lives, and yes, we're talking about play, but it could be in the medical field, judicial, it could be in education. If you want to restore people and you want them to be more productive, you want them to have positive changes in their behavior and in their life, you need to do things with the community. Not to the community and not for the community. Because this is where most of our organizations are. They do things for and to. What do I mean by for? We have this council that sits there, this committee, and they're like, we're going to design X, Y, Z, and we're going to put in this. And then you put it in, and the community doesn't use it. They weren't part of the decision-making process. Or you do things to them because it's more economically feasible to put a metro rail and divide a historical neighborhood that was ethnically based. You do it for economic reasons, never realizing that that upsets the whole culture and their actual success in future generations. And this has gone on historically. So restorative practices allows you to recognize that those things actually occur and figure out a way of how can we create a future together. It's not about blaming the cops. It's not about just looking at the systemic issues. It's not just about you guys are at fault because you're white and about white privilege. It's saying, you know what? I do have some white privilege. It is a history here in America of oppression. It is a history here that we need to recognize, and we are willing to admit that right now, and we want to move on together to create a different type of society. I love restorative practices, but it also means you have to be honest, and you may have to let down some walls. We have to let down some defenses to get to this point at a community level. So we're going to give you some ideas and different ways it happens in the larger community, and then we'll be done, and we're going to have discussion.
So we're going to go through these 5 things, first starting with identifying the traditional owners and new wave of influencers. And so when you're looking at the community, what we are hoping to do is get you all to understand, get all of us to understand collectively that despite our best efforts and intentions within our organizations, within our agencies, if we have not considered some of the other factors that might be taking place from a kid's walk from their home to wherever your community agency is located, or from your school to where you're located. If we think about the 5 kids from Grand Rapids, Michigan as an example, they had no problems with the Croc Center. The Croc Center was a safe space. They had no problems at home, but it was that walk home where the problems arose. And so this is why it's important to consider not just where you're situated, but who are the other stakeholders in that community, and how do you all work together in a cohesive fashion, right? So starting with understanding who are the owners of that, of those local communities. You have something you want to add?
Nope.
Okay, all right. And also, who are the new wave of influencers? And the reason that we added that second part is because typically when we think about Black communities, even for a lot of Latino communities as well, we always think of the role of the church, the role of whatever the institution of faith is, the mosque. But we also know that with millennials and younger families, church attendance has decreased. And so there are other players in communities that we need to be aware of. And it could be the most inconspicuous person, or it could be
A candy lady.
right. So
Y'all know who the candy lady is? The house of the corner usually in urban areas is the candy. See, everybody's going, what?
yeah. So those of you that were with us in Clemson, y'all know the candy lady, but some of us others are not aware. You don't know the candy. So Jesse, let me tell you what it is. So see, you go to a candy lady. She's at the end of your house, at the end of your street, and she sells all kinds of annihilators, frozen cups. You know what a frozen cup is? No. Frozen Kool-Aid.
Frozen Kool-Aid.
In
Yeah.
styrofoam.
And styrofoam. See? That's what I'm saying. See, she knows.
And so you go to the candy lady, and this is where all the kids go after school, right? And they get all the candy, they get all the sweets, they get the chips, the pickles, pickled pig feet. Anybody ever had that before? Or hot sausage? You don't want to admit it. Yeah, so
People give you a weird reaction when you say it.
well, I mean, we ate it as kids. I couldn't touch it today. I'd have heartburn for 3 days, right? But this is what happens. And so the candy lady knows all the kids in the neighborhood, right? Or Mr. Brown, who sits on his porch while the kids walk back and forth from school. Understanding who are those gatekeepers that we may walk by and have no idea that they exist, right? Those are the individuals that you want to start by partnering with. Not going in, hey, let me figure out what we need to do. What does your community need to do? Just go sit on their porch and let them talk to you. Let them share their stories, and you'll begin to gain their trust. And once, and we actually have a colleague, Dr. Myron Floyd, his wife Janetta. She grew up in Clemson, South Carolina, and the last trip that everyone was in South Carolina together, she drove around with Corliss and dropped off at all these different people's houses.
I got to meet Snooki.
Yeah. and she was the gatekeeper. So the moment that she said, Corliss is safe people, and if she comes into your community and wants to do a study, now she has already been given permission through that gatekeeper. And that's the role that these partners can serve. So that's the first step.
Just real quick, also think of fraternities and sororities of the Divine Nine. Those are the Black historical fraternities and sororities. There are chapters in every single community around the US and internationally. And so you have lots of resources that you can use. Barbershops, hairstylists are also plugged in to the communities.
Next is gathering information. So, yeah, Nia, you're smiling because you recognize all of these images. So yesterday we had the opportunity to go over to Southside Community Center right here in Ithaca. And I'm still digesting and understanding what was really unique about that spot. And Corliss and I, we've been to tons of community centers in different parts of the country. And what was really interesting is that there's a story in Southside Community Center in the walls, like you see the photos. And so you're not gonna find a picture or a mural of Martin Luther King on the wall, but you're gonna find murals of all of the people that were prominent in that community, right, up till today. And when you're gathering information, that's what you're looking for. You're looking for who are those historic figures, what are those stories that that have never been told. One quote that I absolutely love is an African proverb, and it essentially says that as long as the hunter continues to tell the tale, you'll never understand, the lion's perspective. I'm paraphrasing it awfully, but it's this idea that usually the one who's winning, that's the one who tells the story, and you never get the other perspective. You never learn those other stories, and there are tons of stories that exist within a lot of these communities that could really help shape the way that you all are engaging with your young people. And until you take the time to sit down, understand those, and gather that information, you're still going to continue to come up short when it comes to the cultural competency and the cultural relevance. All right? Building relationships. And as you can see, each of these steps, they just continue to build on one another. So we've identified who those stakeholders are. We're starting to gather information from them, and in that process, that's where we're building those relationships. One of the things that personally bothers me, and this is just me, I really become annoyed with these videos where the police decide to show up in a neighborhood and play basketball with the kids for 15 minutes, or we're gonna do a special dance with the kids, and I'm gonna do a dance off with them, and then after that I leave. That's a great photo op to say that, see, all cops aren't bad. Oh, okay, sure. I mean, we know that. All right, that's not up for debate. We understand that, but that's not building a relationship. Even for Corliss and myself, even when it comes to doing our research, right? Even as African Americans, we try to be very mindful that we don't just drop off in a community, do this wonderful study, pass out some gift cards to the local grocery store, and then leave, right? Are we really taking the time where these people understand that we're here for you? We're not just here because we need this information. Yes?
And one thing you also need to know, just because you hire a person of color on your staff does not mean they'll be accepted into a particular community. So even for me, I'm at Texas A&M. It is considered one of the largest universities in the country, right? When I go into inner city communities in Houston and Dallas, I was like, yay, I'm here, I'm black, and I want to work with you guys, right? Sometimes the response I get is, now what university are you at? Oh, you over there at that white university. No, we're not talking to you. And so all of a sudden, my research is now pushed back 2 months because another researcher or another organization, like some of you, went into this community, made promises and said, yes, we're gonna help you, we're gonna do this, and it was a one time, and they were done and out, and they never saw anything. They got nothing out of it. So when I come in and I'm genuine, and I wanna make a difference, I have to build that relationship all over again, and it can take time. So it's just, you need to be careful when you go into communities and try to build a relationship and make sure it's genuine.
Next we have visioning. And this is where we are taking the time, when Corliss asked that question earlier, what can we create together? This is where we're actually sitting down and collectively, with the community that we're serving, with the community that we're trying to pull into what we're doing, this is where we sit down and we try to have an understanding together. There's a group that I encourage you all to look up online. It's a Mass Design Group. Has anyone ever heard of this? They're architects, and so they call themselves architect activists, and they're based out of Boston. MASS Design Group. And so the head of this group, his name is Mike Murphy, and all of his work is designed to think about how do we build places that heal? How do we build places that bring people together? And so over here, these are some of the planks. He designed the lynching memorial that's down in Alabama, right? This is one of the hospitals that he built in Africa. This is right here in New York, Poughkeepsie. This is where they did a reuse of a facility, and it was two buildings that were, scheduled to be torn down. He went in and helped them figure out how to redesign it. And then this was something that he had proposed. This is there's a Holocaust Memorial that's going to be opened in the UK in a few years. And this was something that he had proposed to do. But the idea is, and if you get online, you can see the stories for these, but the idea that he was going with was, at no point did he go into any of these communities and design any of this. What he did was he went into those communities, he sat down with the people in that community, and he asked them for their stories. And he just sat down and he listened. And then he hired them to help with the design and to help with the building of these facilities. And then finally, you have design. This is a new image. Nia, have you seen this one? Okay, so this is, anyone seen this one? War of Roses? Rumors of War, sorry, Rumors of War. All right, so Rumors of War. We know a year ago, 2 years ago, we had all of these issues with the Confederate statues all over the South. And so this was built, and so this is a black man with dreads riding this horse. He has on a hoodie, and this is actually going to be moved. This is right now up here in Times Square, New York, and it's going to actually be moved down to Richmond, Virginia. And they're going to put it on a street that's named after Arthur Ashe. And so the idea is, again, thinking about it from the community level, right? What schools, and I know we're in the North, so we don't recognize, still you have some schools like J.O. Mann, where they're named after these supposedly prominent people, but then when you look into their histories, you realize that they still were segregationists. And so, when we think about the facilities that we're in, the streets that we're sitting on, the images that are up in our recreation centers, and we're thinking about the design and the layout of our facilities, no, we can't rip down our buildings and start all over, but is it possible that we have no representation in any of the posters that are on the wall? Is it possible that we have no representation out in the playgrounds, in the play areas, where kids don't see anything that looks like this is something that means something to me? And so when we're thinking about designing and setting up the structures in our community as a whole, that's what we're trying to drive at, not just within your agency, but even in that community. Is it designed in a way, is it something as simple as we just need to change this street name?
So what does this all mean? We want you to start thinking about culturally responsive play. If play is universal, if we say it's central to our learning, and that we know it empowers youth intellectually, socially, emotionally, we need to recognize, respect, and use youth's identities and backgrounds as meaningful sources by using cultural reference to impart knowledge, skills, and attitude. So culture is important to play, and we have to begin to upset the system to get back to its importance for there to truly be play for all. Last slide, and we are going to end it here. This is a slide of my nephew Amari, who's a sophomore at Middle Tennessee. I didn't get his permission to put this up here, but I'm gonna use it anyway because I'm the auntie. And I need to send him a care package anyway, so I'm just gonna give him a little $50 Amazon credit card and be like, hey, I put you in the slide. So before you leave here this evening, because we've run out of time, but I know you guys may have questions, this is how I reflect when I do different types of seminars. At the head level, what have you learned? At the heart level, what do you feel or how do you feel? And finally, at the feet level, what do you plan on doing about it? What's the action step that you're going to take? And so as we close out, I want you to think head, heart, and feet. Depending on how they want to close out, it's up to you guys. We can have that discussion now, but if we don't have time, I'm going to do you like I do my class. I'm going to stand at this door, Harrison's going to have to stand at that door, and you got to tell me either head, heart, or feet before you can leave out. And I will block you, just so you know. Oh, we do have time. All right, anybody? Oh, yeah.